Growing Up White. It's Weird. Book 1, Chapter 5, Alice. If you were born as part of the baby boomer generation, you might hear Alice and think of a song and the lyric, "Go Ask Alice," which refers to a character from a book. They were movies, animated movies, live action movies made about the character. That character being Alice in Wonderland. I actually wrote my own song about Alice in Wonderland, but that's another time, another life. This Alice is a combination of the song Alice and the character Alice in Wonderland. That being Alice Cooper, the rock star, the band, the showman, Alice Cooper. I'm about 13 or 14, and my older brother and his friends who drive go to concerts. So, one concert, my mother says, take your younger brother along. So they do. And that concert just happens to be Alice Cooper. They just released the album Billion Dollar Babies, and the band was touring to support that album because touring was either a losing business or maybe, if you were lucky, a break-even business. So they made all their money from record sales. My history with music up until that point was basically not much. I don't remember my parents ever playing any kind of music. The only music I might have heard came from an AM radio. I never heard of FM radio or even Alice Cooper, but it sounded like fun. I got to hang out with older kids, so I said yes. And there were two main places you would go to see a concert in the area. Both places were a short drive from where we lived. One was the Tower Theater, which held about 2,000 people, and I saw a lot of concerts there. They were usually smaller bands, smaller artists, usually one just starting out, or bands that wanted an intimate experience for their audience. Then, where I saw Alice Cooper, the Philadelphia Spectrum, home of the NBA 76ers and the NHL Flyers. Now, speaking of the Flyers, here's a little side story for you. The Flyers, also nicknamed the Broad Street Bullies because Broad Street was the main street that ran through Philadelphia, and they were known for being kind of tough on the ice. They had won the NHL Stanley Cup Championship, and the city itself went crazy celebrating that night. And I just happened to be watching the game at my fake aunt's place, and someone had the idea of going out to be part of the celebration. We didn't have to drive into the city. Our little area was going crazy also celebrating. So, my mother, remember, she's a cool mom, got as many kids as she could into her VW van. A little story about the VW van. As you might recall from earlier chapters, my mother and father both worked. So they would buy a new car every 3 years. They would trade it in, buy another one, trade it in, buy another one. And then they would get a different model every time they bought a new car. Now, my mother always wanted a large car, like a station wagon, or in this case, a van, so she could take us kids and our fake cousins around to different events, because that was her thing. Why a VW van? Well, because my father, he had a 1971 green VW Super Beetle with an automatic stick transmission. The car that I learned to drive in and get my license when I turned 16. Now, it was a small car, only 4 cylinders, but reliable and great on gas. You could actually fill up the car, drive from our town all the way down to the Jersey Shore, about 60 miles, and back on less than a full tank of gas. Now, speaking of the Jersey Shore, here's a little side story for you. My grandmother on my father's side had a duplex in Atlantic City, and she would invite me down for summer weeks or summer weekends to spend time with her. And I gotta tell you something, that grandmother was very nice, was very generous, and she always made sure I got a gift from her for Christmas or my birthday. This one summer, I went down there. I was about 13, and I got to stay at her duplex. Not only was she a nurse all her life, but she was a smart businesswoman. The duplex, and now this is way before Atlantic City had gambling. The duplex, she lived on one floor, and then she rented another floor to a couple. The couple I met when I was there was kind of a hippie couple, man, woman, 2 kids, white, of course. And they were into meditation. It might have been TM, Transcendental Meditation, which is widely popular, even now in the 21st century, as some celebrities promote it. And I even went to a neighborhood meeting, but I never quite followed up after that. I have nothing against any meditation. I practiced meditation for many, many years. I practiced yoga for many, many years. And I followed people like Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer when they were around, and Deepak Chopra and others like that. Okay, back to Atlantic City. Some of the things my grandmother would do for me is treat me to a horseback ride on the beach. And what it was is basically a gentleman had a horse. He would put me up on the horse and we would walk down the beach, not galloping, just walk along the beach on the horse and walk back. It was about 30 minutes. And then she would also give me a little money so I could go to the piers and get some Steele's Fudge or see some shows. The one show that I really wanted to see was the diving horse. There was a painting, a large painting of a woman dressed in a very beautiful bathing outfit atop a beautiful white horse, frozen in midair as it leapt off a platform and was headed into a pool. So I got admission to see this event. Now, the real one wasn't quite as amazing as the painting made it out to be. I go there, and there's a woman dressed in that bathing suit atop a horse, and the horse climbs up a small, narrow ramp onto a platform. Maybe it's about 15 feet high, and down below is a pool. And I'm thinking, okay, the horse is going to jump out into midair and land in the pool. Well, here's what really happens. She gets up there on the platform, the horse looks down, and the horse bends down onto a ramp towards the pool and maybe slides 5 feet into the water. The horse doesn't leap, he just slides on down without much of a splash. Advertising gets you all the time. Now, one of the other events I got to see was on another pier. This was a freak show or a circus sideshow. Again, you had these big paintings of these freaks. One was the blockhead, one was some kind of anomaly, and then the highlight, which I'll get to in a moment. So I go into the freak show or the sideshow tent, and I'm looking at the blockhead. The blockhead is a guy, he comes out with a hammer and a nail. And you think, okay, he's going to hammer a nail into his head like the painting showed, right? He gets up there and he says, if I hammer a nail into my head, I will die. So instead what he does, he takes this long nail, sticks it in his nose, not up his nose, but straight into his nose. Which, yeah, that's kind of disturbing, but I figure he has some kind of cavity or hole there that he can put the nail further back than anybody else can, and he takes the hammer and pretends to tap it. And then he moves his head around with a nail in his nose. And it's kind of gross, but it's not really a blockhead. Now, the main event. It was a painting, a large painting on the side of the tent of a white woman with black hair in a jungle printed one-piece bathing suit. And next to her stood a gorilla. And it was billed as some kind of sea jungle woman's transformation. So, of course, as a 12, 13-year-old, I'm so curious about how this works. So I buy a ticket and go into the tent. It's dark inside. They're playing some jungle music. Straight ahead are maybe about 5 stairs that lead up to a narrow hallway with a light in it. The announcer comes on and starts to build up the suspense as if to get ready for this transformation. And slowly an image of that woman appears at the end or the back of that narrow hallway. Her eyes open up. She smiles, and we're all looking, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and the music gets a little louder, and the announcer starts saying things. And slowly, the image of the jungle woman disappears or dissolves into the gorilla. So there we are, maybe about 10 of us in this dark tent, looking up at this gorilla. What happens next is the gorilla awakes. We wait a moment, then the gorilla starts walking towards us down the narrow hallway, banging on the walls, making gorilla sounds, and finally to the cage door. Now we're safe because the cage door has a big lock and chain on it. But you can kind of guess where this is going because we weren't safe. The gorilla burst open the cage door, and all of us, or most of us, run screaming from the dark tent back onto the boardwalk pier. And that was the main event. Atlantic City also holds many other memories. One of my real cousins, a girl around my age, came down to my grandmother's place, and we became close. We'd walk along the pier. We'd see the peanut planter's man. It was a guy dressed up in a large peanut shell, and he would hand out peanuts. We'd watch them blow glass. There was Irene's gift store, where I bought a peace sign, a glass-blown peace sign. You can go over to the inlet and feed seals. The Steel Pier, besides being known for its famous fudge, also had concerts. I saw a band there called the Ides of March, which eventually turned into the band Survivor, which had a hit song, Eye of the Tiger, in a Rocky movie. So it was a really great time, and I thank my grandmother for giving me those memories. Okay, so go back to the VW van story. When it was time to buy a new car, my mother or father would sometimes take us with them. And this was so exciting because we're kids, we're getting a new car, we're running around the showroom, and the salesman always liked that because, like Christmas, once you get the kids, you get the parents. So there we are at the VW dealership, and my mother's looking at a passenger van. It's red with a white top. It has many seats. It has an automatic transmission, so it's like perfect for her. Then I see a yellow camper van. Inside is a little refrigerator, a bed, a little sink, and I'm thinking that's the one for us. So we all agree we're going to get the camper van. But here's what really happened. We go to pick up the van, and they bring out the red and white passenger van. And I'm sad and shocked and want to know why we're not getting the camper van. So my mother, and this is her art of lying, and it's not a criticism, she says, well, what happened is they were getting it ready, but it fell off the lift and broke. So we had to get the other one. I was okay with that because, look, it's a new car. And the reality was we didn't need a camper van. This passenger van was fine. And it actually came in handy for me on many occasions. Okay, so now we're back to the Philadelphia Flyers winning the Stanley Cup. That night, the city going crazy celebrating, and in our town, they're celebrating also. So, we're at my fake aunt's with my fake cousins. My mother loads as many kids as she can into that VW van that she just got. We drive down the street and end up on McDade Boulevard. McDade Boulevard was the main boulevard that went through many, many towns, and that night it was jammed with people celebrating the Flyers' win. So we get into the crowd in the van, and we're moving along slowly up and down McDade Boulevard, having a great time. There are people drinking and shouting. They have the Flyers jerseys on, and we're just loving it. Also, at that time, a popular thing with white people to do was something called streaking. Streaking, it didn't last long, but what it was is a person would take off their clothes and run around naked, and they called it streaking. There was even a song about streaking. There was a streaker at the Oscar event one year, and then sometimes you would see them at concerts. So, we're in the van, we're on McDade Boulevard, and we're just slowly moving along at the light. And somehow, I get this idea in my mind that I should streak. I don't know where it came from. I don't know if it was a dare or what. But nobody else in the van, my mother was driving, remember, came up with the idea of streaking. So I take off my shirt, and they're looking at me, and I say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to streak. And, okay, I'm laughing. And they look at me like either I'm crazy or they're cheering me on. So we're at the light. We're stopped. I take off my pants. I get out, run through the crowd of all these people around the van and back into the van, shut the door, and put my pants on. So we move up another car length at the light. I'm caught up in the frenzy of the celebration. I take off my shirt again. I take off my pants again, naked in the van that my mother is driving. One of the kids slides open the door again. I jump out into the crowd of people cheering, and they look at me, of course, because I'm naked, and I run around the front of the van, the side of the van, the back of the van, and back into the van. The light turns green, and we proceed back to my fake aunt's place. So that was my moment of celebrating the Philadelphia Flyers winning the Stanley Cup, and I got to streak. Yeah, like I said, growing up white, we were weird. Now, let's go back to the Philadelphia Spectrum and the Alice Cooper concert. I'm in the car with my older brother and his friends, and we get to the venue. And we get to our seats. Now, our seats were at the back of the arena, right off the floor. The floor was where the teams would play, but it was covered up with wood, and people would sit there before the concert and then stand. There were no seats. It was known as general admission. And at some concerts, I was on the floor also. But our seats were directly in line with the stage, high enough where we could see over all the people standing. And the people were part of the show. Some people were dressed as members of the band. I remember a group of 5 guys walking around dressed like the band with the makeup on and the hair, taking pictures and saying hi to people. And then there were beach balls being passed around overhead. There were frisbees being thrown around. And then there were glow sticks. Glow sticks were these little about 6-inch long white tubes. And then what you would do is you would take it and slightly bend it, and a glass capsule inside would break and release this green goo. When the lights went down, the green goo would light up and glow in the dark. And then people would be throwing them around, waving them. Some were on rubber bands. You could spin it around your head really fast. And so it made for this really cool event. One thing I didn't like, somebody threw a firecracker, and of course the crowd kind of liked it. But then at one concert, someone threw an M80. An M80 was a very intense firecracker. Supposedly it was about an eighth stick of dynamite, but when they threw it, I was on the floor and it went off above my head. It scared me. My ears were ringing and I didn't want to be there anymore. Luckily, this didn't happen too often because security cracked down on that. So there I am in a row with my brother and his friends, and we're just waiting for the concert to begin. Some of them are smoking cigarettes. Some of them are smoking pot. They're passing a joint along. I pass on it. And then some of them are drinking. You see, if you were 18 at the time, you could buy a cup of beer at the venue. That's how they made a lot of money. Beer and food sales, and also parking. So I'm sitting there with the group of guys. They're smoking pot. Of course, they pass along the joint and they smuggled it in the front of their pants. And one of the guys has a wine bag. I don't know what a wine bag is, but I know he put it down the front of his pants so they wouldn't find it. Security couldn't find it there because they don't check the front of your pants. So he pulls out a wine bag, which is a leather pouch, a little spout on the end. So he raises it above his head, squeezes it, and a little stream of wine comes out into his mouth. Then he passes it to me. I don't know how to do it, so he does it for me. And I think, okay, I'll try it. I'm there at the concert, part of the crowd, having a good time. So I open my mouth, he squeezes the wine bag, and a little stream of wine goes into my mouth. I mean, it just tasted like some kind of juice. It didn't do anything to me because it was so small. But there I was, at my first concert, being part of what was going on. Not so weird. But something weird did happen. The guy next to me, he threw up his dinner. Peaches and ham. Before Alice Cooper comes out, there's the opening band, which was called Fluorescent Leach and Eddie. I think they were the main members in a band called The Turtles who had a hit in the 60s. So the opening band comes out. People aren't really excited, and I don't remember much about it, just that they were wearing Hawaiian shirts, and there was some song they did about diving for pearls, and they were only on for about 20 minutes, and it wasn't a big show like Alice Cooper would be. It was just some guys on a stage kind of having fun. Okay, now the main event. Since this was Alice Cooper's 6th album, they had many years of touring experience and they knew how to put on a show. The tour before this is the one where Alice Cooper hung himself. And this is the one where he had his head cut off in a guillotine, which was made popular back in France. Paris, France, where I was born. Okay, so the lights go down. I see all the glow sticks. The music starts and a single light comes on, and there is Alice Cooper directly in front of me, dressed in white, full makeup, $1 Billion Baby makeup, and these high platform leopard skin boots. He starts singing the opening song from the album, Hello, Hooray. The crowd is going crazy. To me, this is a magical experience. The band, the singer, they're like these otherworldly beings or gods, and I am having the time of my life. They play the entire album. Highlights of the show were during one song, a guy comes out with a huge drill with a light on it and pretends to drill into Alice Cooper's mouth. And Alice then chases a giant tooth with a giant toothbrush during the song Unfinished Sweet. And then he brings out his snake for Sick Things. As you might recall, I'm not a fan of snakes since one of them consumed my beloved pet, Fifi. The highlight of the show, of course, the guillotine during the song I Love the Dead, where he is placed into a guillotine, locked in there by some henchmen. Then the moment comes of anticipation. The guillotine blade comes down, chops his head off, which falls into a basket, and the henchman grabs the head and throws it around. And of course, Alice Cooper reemerges and sings more songs. Besides all the songs from the $1 Billion Babies album, one highlight being Elected, where they had Sparklers, one of their most controversial songs, Dead Babies, their big hit, I'm 18, and one of my favorites, Under My Wheels. Of course, some of them were part of the encore, where the band leaves the stage, they leave the lights half on, the crowd cheers and claps and chants, then the band comes out, does another song or two, then they leave, and if the crowd is into it, they come back for another encore. And you could have multiple songs, multiple encores. All I remember is this was one hell of a show. And after the show, I went outside and bought a concert t-shirt. These were bootleg concert t-shirts. They were black with a picture of the band on it, and they were cheap, maybe like $5. And these kids would run up to you and say, you want to buy a shirt, pull out of a bag your size, and you put it on. And the cool thing was, the next day when you went to school, kids would see you with the shirt and ask about the concert, or someone else went and they would talk about the concert. So it was kind of a community thing. And of course, I went out and bought the $1 Billion Babies album, listened to it all the time, and then bought the album before that, School's Out, the album before that, Killers, and the album before that, Love It to Death. All because of one concert. And that's how it worked at the time. You would go to the show, you would hear the songs, you would buy the records. And Alice Cooper, besides being my very first concert, became my favorite artist at the time, and basically changed my life. So let's wrap up Chapter 5. Growing up white. It's weird, but can be fun too.